مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. هل جاءت الخطة دون المستوى وبعد قوات الأوان؟ أم أن الخطة مبالغ فيها أمام العدو الخطأ؟ منتقدو الرئيس أوباما وهم كثر يسوقون أسبابا مختلفة جدا لكون استراتيجياته لأضعاف الدولة الإسلامية أو داعش وهزيمتها في نهاية الأمر فكرة سيئة. من ناحية يعتقد بعض الساسة والخبراء السياسيين أن خطة الرئيس أوباما تنطوي على قدر أقل من اللازم من القوة العسكرية الأمريكية وتعتمد على أطراف فاعلة إقليمية ضعيفة لمواجهة تهديد خطير للمصالح القومية الأمريكية. من ناحية أخرى يعتقد ساسة وخبراء سياسيون آخرون أن خطة الرئيس أوباما تبالغ في تصوير التهديد الذي تمثله الدولة الإسلامية وستزوج بأمريكا إلى حرب أخرى في الشرق الأوسط دون داعي. هل أي من هذين الانتقادين صحيح؟ أم أن الرئيس أوباما وجد الحل الوسط الذكي بالخطة التي قدمها إلى الشعب الأمريكي؟ لمناقشة الانتقاداته الاستراتيجية الرئيس وسياساته الخارجية بشكل عام يسعدني أن أرحب بدكتور بيتر بروكس من مؤسسة هيريتيج المحافظة. Welcome back to Dakhil, Washington. I'm sitting here with Dr. Peter Brooks to talk about American strategy in the Middle East and the critique of American strategy. Peter, thank you very much for joining me.
Good to be here.
Let's look at some of the critiques of what President Obama has outlined for the struggle, the battle against ISIL. First, there's the too little, too late critique. Why too little? Why too late?
Well, I mean, obviously, people have been talking about the issue of Iraq and Syria for quite some time. I mean, the Arab Spring is 3+ years ago. So people have been concerned about that, and perhaps the United States has been a bit hands-off. Instead of trying to shape the international environment, it's kind of been allowing it to do its own thing. And in some cases, critics might say that we've not been enough involved and tried to shape the environment to advance American interests. And where we are today is obviously of tremendous concern. There's chaos in Iraq. There's a civil war going on in Syria where as many as maybe 200,000 people have now perished. And the United States is a global leader. It's a global nation. It has interests around the globe, and the Middle East is part of that.
So, would you associate yourself, for example, with the too little, too late critique?
I think that is my concern, and I think you probably could find it in one of my columns recently talking about that. That's the big question. There have been a lot of folks that have been asking the president to take a stronger hand or have a stronger policy towards Syria, for instance. There's been a power vacuum that has left the country basically with an Assad regime which doesn't have a lot of fans, as well as Islamists, including groups like Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State, which has obviously developed a caliphate now that spans both Syria and Iraq. Recent news has talked about plots against the West that are being formulated out of both Syria and potentially Iraq. It seems to be mostly Syria, and that includes the United States, the number of Westerners who have gone there. Reports of training camps that are training foreign fighters to return to their native lands to undertake acts of terror. And now it seems like we are a bit behind in reacting to this. We're more reactive than proactive towards this problem. And we perhaps, Rob, some might say that we have fewer easier or good choices. We have a lot of hard choices that we have to undertake or decide upon to deal with the issues because they've gotten so intense and so dangerous.
So on the too little side of it, or the too late side rather, Hillary Clinton quite recently, quite famously said one of the failures of the Obama administration foreign policy was its reluctance to act in Syria earlier, 2012, 2013. Do you think that reluctance opened the aperture for ISIL to expand its role?
I think so. I mean, of course, we can't go back and examine that, right? I mean, in fairness to this administration, we can't go back and see what would have been different if they had done something different. That's the advantage of hindsight. And of course, we don't know what Secretary Clinton proposed to the president during these times. There have been some, including the current Secretary of State, John Kerry, that were talking about arming a Syrian opposition, which the president is talking about now. So I think that dealing with a chronic problem or a problem, dealing with it early is probably good advice, no matter whether you're talking about medicine, international relations, or your personal life or your business life. So I think that there could have been, the president took a view, a position, and believing that the Assad regime would fall, that secular, pro-leaning Western types might take over power there. Unfortunately, there was a tremendous power vacuum that the Islamists and the terrorists were able to fill, unfortunately.
Now, on the other side of the debate, there's a very different critique, which is not too little too late, but too much too fast. It's not our fight. This is a fight for Middle Easterners. Let's avoid the swamp. We can't possibly affect Sunni-Shia conflicts that go back 1,000 years. What do you think about this critique?
I think it's gone. I think that was a critique several weeks ago, maybe a month ago. But I think public opinion polls are moving in a different direction, more towards the direction that I'm talking about. Concerns about it, especially because of the terrible things, the heinous acts we've seen coming out of some of these groups, especially the Islamic State. The beheading of two American journalists. I think that really grabbed the American spirit and shook America from that view. And I think public opinion polls have shifted significantly. And I think the president probably didn't want to be at that podium talking about increasing American involvement in Iraq and potentially Syria. But I think he was forced to by American public opinion. This, I think, had a major effect. Those videos of those beheadings, the news of those beheadings had a major effect on American public opinion, as I think elsewhere, including in Western Europe.
And yet the president still articulated a strategy which is quite restrained. I think you're absolutely right in identifying how he tapped into this change in public opinion. The strategy to address it seemed quite restrained. No ground forces, no combat troops. It all rests really on the success of the Iraqi government in being inclusive. Do you think that the strategy matches the objective?
We'll have to see. I mean, the president has obviously, he's the commander-in-chief. He's the political leader of the United States. This is ultimately his decision. He's taken counsel of the Pentagon, of the State Department, of the intelligence agencies, and he's put together a strategy he believes will lead to success. The bottom line, whether we're a critic or not, is that we don't know the future. Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist, once said that prediction is hard, especially about the future, and that's true. My sense is the president is using what I would call, I hate to use an American colloquialism, but a minimax strategy. Minimal effort to achieve a maximum result. He can always increase the number of Syrian opposition forces he's training. He can always, although he said American ground forces are out, but he can always increase the bombing campaign. Since over the number of weeks, we've only seen 150 or so American airstrikes. That can certainly be stepped up. There could be heavier weapons provided to the Peshmerga or the Iraqi government. We could have other forces in the region come on to be helpful. So we're going to have to see. The president can always turn up the volume, or he can always increase American involvement, or bring it, like I said, other forces on. So this is just the beginning. Early on, we heard the administration say they thought it was going to be a 3-year effort. They're not talking about timelines any longer. So we're just going to have to see. We're getting involved in something new.
I was just about to ask you about the timeline. By saying 3 years, really the message is it goes on beyond the life of this administration. and will be bequeathed to my successor, whoever that may be. How does that change both the political environment and the sort of strategy environment when the planners all know that there will be a new commander-in-chief that comes in before this battle is over?
There's a couple of things that could be at play, Rob. Obviously, managing expectations. I think he's telling the American people that this is going to be difficult. Maybe he's telling us it's going to be difficult at this level of effort.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you think that it's, if you're of the school of thought that it's maybe too little, that it depends on how much, if you're painting a wall, it depends how much paint you put on your brush to see how long it's going to take you to do it. So if the president has come forward with this strategy, maybe they believe, although they have moved away from that 3-year time period, would take 3 years, which I think is kind of a dangerous area to get into, predicting timelines on these sort of things. But if he had decided he was going to train 100,000 Syrian opposition forces,
instead of just the 5,000 that they've talked about.
Exactly. That if the level of effort was increased, perhaps it could be dealt with in a more quick, timely manner. So I can't sit here and divine what the president was thinking in terms of that. And like I said, the White House seems to have moved away from that timeline. He's often been criticized over arbitrary timelines on military operations, and I think that was probably wise. And as each day goes by, we find out new things. We're finding out about dangerous al-Qaeda groups that are not the Islamic State, Khorasan, some of these other groups that may be plotting. So this is pretty serious stuff, and in many ways, I think we're learning more each day for all those of us outside the government, and we'll maybe adjust our views based on what is made public. And not everything can be made public because of intelligence sources and methods. So based on what we know, we're making judgments. You and I make judgments because we're not inside the government. So we'll have to see where this goes. And I'm sure there's an old American saying, military saying, that says no plan survives contact with the enemy. I think it was Dwight Eisenhower, president, and when he was the general, said that it's not the ability to make a plan, it's the ability to continue to plan. Because this is, in many ways, conflict is a very dynamic sort of situation. And it's like an athletic match. You go in with a game plan. But if you're not doing very well in the first quarter or the first part of the game, you often have to change that game plan. And that's the same thing is true with military conflict, is that you go in with a plan, and then you're going to have to see how your plan unfolds and how well it does, and then you have to make adjustments. So right now we're just at the beginning of that.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk more with Peter Brooks about how the world might be viewing this new American engagement in the Middle East in just a moment. Peter Brooks is Senior Fellow for National Security Affairs at the Heritage Foundation, Washington's preeminent conservative think tank. In addition, Dr. Brooks is serving his 4th term as a congressionally appointed member of the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. He previously served in the administration of President George W. Bush as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Affairs. In that post, he was responsible for U.S. defense policy for 38 countries and 5 bilateral defense alliances throughout Asia. A prolific writer and media commentator, Dr. Brooks is the author of the book A Devil's Triangle: Terrorism, Weapons of Mass Destruction, and Rogue States. Previously, he served as a professional staff member with the House International Relations Committee. He also served with the State Department at the United Nations. A decorated Navy veteran, Dr. Brooks served on active duty in Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East in aviation and intelligence billets. He received his bachelor's degree from the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, his master's from Johns Hopkins University, and his doctorate from Georgetown. Let's take a look, if we can, at how some of the great powers around the world might be looking at what America is doing and how it might affect their own strategic thinking. Let's start with a country you know so well, China. How do you think China is looking at this new American engagement, and what impact does it have on them?
Well, you know, you'd be surprised, but for people who may not follow China, but China has a serious concern with violent extremism, Islamist violent extremism. The western part of China is dominated by Chinese Muslims. And in fact, on the U.S. list of state sponsors of, not state sponsored terror, but terrorism list, foreign terrorist organizations, there is a Chinese group, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. And they have to remember China's geography. It backs up into South Asia and the Middle East, Afghanistan, places like that. They're very concerned about the rise of Islamist extremism, violent Islamist extremism. At this point, we're going to have to see what China does at the UN Security Council. If the United States decides it needs to go to the UN Security Council to get support for any sort of operations, especially in Syria. Iraq has asked us to come in, has given us authority. Under international law, the United States is free to operate there. Syria is a different issue. So the United States may go to the United Nations. We'll have to see what China does. But China does have concerns. China may not oppose a Security Council resolution. They might abstain. And I'm sure that they're thinking that they have concerns that what is happening with the establishment of a caliphate and how this might spread throughout South Asia and perhaps to Western China, to their region called Xinjiang.
Let me ask you about Russia. We're involved in a competition with Russia over Ukraine at the same time as America gets more deeply engaged here. The Russian-Syrian relationship is a factor in American policy. How do you think Moscow is viewing this new American commitment to fight in the Middle East?
I think they're concerned, obviously, because they have a long-standing relationship with Syria. They've sold Syrian arms. But yes, I mean, Syria has been an optic or a way for Russia to have influence in the Middle East, and they've been firmly behind the Assad regime.
Let me come back to this question, not so much of the timeline specifically, but how the fight against jihadism will now be an open-ended, long-term American involvement. Do you see this as something that will be with us beyond the life, certainly beyond the life of this president, but this presidency, but is this now sort of part of our national security that we will be fighting jihadists as far as the eye can see?
I think it's the new normal, unfortunately. I mean, I would be dishonest if I didn't tell you that I'm surprised that we're still dealing with this issue. I was at the Pentagon on 9/11. And so I didn't expect that this was going to be something that would be seizing our attention so many years later. I think when somebody called it the long war, I think they were right. If I may be historically incorrect here, but I don't think America has ever been at war for such a long period of time. Think about World War II, 4 years, 5 years. Even World War I, another terrible conflict. Vietnam was a longish war, but I think this exceeds it. I think the important thing for the United States to understand is that it's under threat. And I am increasingly surprised at the vectors from which that threat is coming. The big debate right now, besides the force structure and the strategy, is what about these new groups that we're hearing about? We've heard about Jabhat al-Nusra for a long time. Now we're hearing about a group called Khorasan, for us outside the government. The government may have known about it, and they're saying that they are a significant threat, and there may be competition among these violent Islamist extremist groups, these terrorist groups, for preeminence. As you know, if you're the leader of this sort of movement, it may bring more foot soldiers, it may bring more funding, more resources, more support. And so one may be trying to outdo the other. The problem is that the innocent civilians that will pay the price. So I think it's I think many people, I certainly put myself as surprised that we're still dealing with this so many years after 9/11. Terrorism's been around for a long time. There's no doubt about that. It's goes back to ancient times. But this persistent threat we're dealing with, I think, it surprises me, and then the continuation of the new threats, the development of new threats, I think is also something we need to be sober about. Complacency would be a huge mistake, whether it's the United States or any of these other countries that are under threat from this terrorism.
Peter Brooks, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات وتعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول الجدل السياسي في الولايات المتحدة بشأن السياسة الأميركية في العراق وسوريا، أرجو أن تتصلوا بي مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhura.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف، شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.